Live in New York.
Chris, Ambassador Haley told UN Security Council members that North Korea's launch needs a decisive response.
Time is short. Action is required.
Haley says North Korea makes the world a more dangerous place and cited its treatment of Otto Warmbier, who was held captive and returned to the U.S. in a coma before his death, as an example of its true nature. Haley says a strong UN response must not target just North Korea.
We will look at any country that chooses to do business with this outlaw regime.
Haley says that includes China, which openly trades with North Korea, Chris.
Well, thanks. President Trump's about to land in Poland on his second foreign trip in office. Live in Warsaw, here's Fox's Simon Owen.
Chris, when President Trump slammed NATO members earlier this year for not spending enough on defence, one of the few countries he wasn't pointing the finger at was Poland. This country, next door to Russia and concerned about Russian aggression, is one of only 5 NATO members meeting a target to spend 2% of GDP on defence. Poland's government is roughly on the same wavelength as the president. It's more conservative than many European administrations. The president likely to receive a warm welcome. Chris?
Simon Owen, live in Warsaw, Poland. Thanks. If you count up until this morning, more than 100 people were shot over the long holiday weekend in Chicago. Police carried out a series of gang raids.
Chicago police did it by selecting their targets primarily on the east and west sides of the city. All told, cops made 58 arrests, confiscated 7 guns, and turned up 500 grams of heroin and crack cocaine. The vast majority of those swept up in the raids are being hit with felonies. Dakari Turner, Fox News.
Fair and balanced.
Council.
At the closing bell on Wall Street, the Dow pretty much flat, down about a point. The S&P up 3 today, the NASDAQ up 40. True Religion Apparel files for bankruptcy. The company's jeans were more popular about a decade ago. Some firefighters are racing from one wildfire to another as more and more pop up throughout the West.
The Southwest, mainly Arizona, is the most active area for fires right now, and the nation's number one firefighting priority is called the Burrow Fire. It's east of Tucson. Homes are threatened there. Robin Broyles with the National Interagency Fire Center says they expect monsoons to head to the area by early next week.
We expect to have some significant wetting rain in the Southwest, but as those systems dry out, as it moves across the West, we are probably going to be experiencing some dry lightning with those.
New fires popped up in Colorado as well as Nevada. Parts of the Great Basin area, including Nevada, Idaho, and Utah, are seeing extreme heat for the rest of the week. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
Happy birthday to the world's most famous meat in a can.
If you think spam is just junk email, you're missing out.
You don't say ham, you say spam.
There have been commercials for decades for the meat in a can, but this is Spam's most memorable moment. The Monty Python skit featuring Spam, the meat that became famous helping feed soldiers in World War II. It's now 80 years old, introduced July 5th, 1937.
I don't like spam!
But many do. More than 7 billion cans sold.
Don't make a fuss, dear. I'll have your spam. I love it.
He should go to Hawaii, where per person they consume the most spam in the U.S. Even have an annual Spam Jam Festival. Dave Anthony, Fox News.
Venus Williams makes it into the third round of the Wimbledon tennis tournament in England. So is the defending men's champ Andy Murray. Two-time champ Petra Kvitova is knocked out, though. She's working her way back from being cut by an intruder at her home last year. I'm Chris Foster, Fox News Radio.
And welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me,
Eric Olson and
Dr. Clarissa Cole.
Better known as the Three Amigos of True Crime. Now, Eric, we have a heck of a show tonight. Not only a great show, but a thought-provoking show. And those I always love when it does both. Entertains and informs all at the same time. And so why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest tonight, and we'll learn more about, well, Munchausen's. And, of course, Dr. Cole, she will be invaluable during that discussion because she can really go deep on that and explain even more.
Because she knows stuff.
She does. She's the smartest forensic psychologist I've ever met. Oh, I might be the only one I've ever met, but she is the smartest one I've ever met, and she is definitely an asset to the show. So without any further ado, Mr. Olson.
All right. In Mommy, Dead, and Dearest, provocative documentarian Erin Lee Carr explores an intimate crime in the age of social media. Things are not always as they appear, especially in the case of Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose. And what starts out as a grisly tale of matricide morphs into a rabbit hole of deception. Child abuse, mental illness, and forbidden love converge in this mystery of a mother and daughter who were thought to be living a fairy tale life that turned out to be a living nightmare, featuring exclusive access to Gypsy from prison and a trove of police interrogation tapes, medical records, and secret conversations. Mommy, Dead, and Dearest is a disturbing first-hand look at a life arrested and the consequences of trying to keep someone young forever. It also explores one of psychology's most controversial conditions, Munchausen, I love that name, by proxy syndrome. Erin Lee Carr is a New York-based director, producer, and writer whose newest film we just discussed, Mommy, Dead, and Dearest, had its world premiere at South by Southwest and Hot Docs in 2017, and it aired on HBO May 15th, 2017. The film ignited a discussion on Twitter and was received well by critics and audiences alike. Her debut film, Thought Crimes, The Case of a Cannibal Cop, premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival and Hot Docs Film Festival in 2015 and aired on HBO that very May. Variety named Erin one of the 10 documentarians to watch as far back as 2015. Neil Genslinger of the New York Times called Thought Crimes absorbing and a primer for the century ahead. Dubbed the Cannibal Cop, former New York police officer Gilberto Valle was convicted of conspiring to kidnap and eat women. Darn it, I hate it when they do that. In March 2013, before working with HBO, Erin hailed from the video team at Vice, specifically Motherboard, where her content has amassed over 25 million views worldwide. One of her short films for Vice, Click, Print, Gun, won a Webby in 2013 and gained 7 million views in its first week online. Welcome to the program, Erin Lee Carr.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. That bio sounds a lot cooler than I actually am.
Poo-poo, perish the thought. Your coolness exudes. I feel it's coming through the microphone. My lips are freezing.
Excellent.
Well, Erin, first I want to say wonderful job on the documentary. And the way it was presented was very informative, and it was disturbing all at the same time. But it wasn't like, it was a disturbing to make you think. It was more about, wow, does this actually exist in this world? And indeed it does. And that, in a lot of ways, is the scariest thing of all. You know, beyond the one case that we're talking about, there must be thousands upon thousands of people inflicted with Munchausen's by proxy, which Dr. Cole will give us a complete rundown here in a minute. But I can only imagine gearing up to do this documentary and looking into this disorder. Were you shocked at how common it can be?
Yeah, I mean, my first introduction to Munchausen by proxy was The Sixth Sense, M. Night Shyamalan's film. You have that, like, Misha Barton character, and there's that iconic her sort of under the bed and she's been poisoned. And so I hadn't really thought about it since. And so when I started looking into this case and it was, inferred that there was a potential disorder, the fictitious disorder, Munchausen by proxy, I could not stop thinking about it, researching it. But it also was a lot and super, super heavy to sort of contend with.
I can only imagine, and Clarissa, of course, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the disorder and who it really affects.
Typically, Munchausen's is seen more typically in women than in men. But I think that part of that might be due to the fact that women are more typically the caregivers of the children. So I don't know if more men staying home and taking care of the kids, if that is going to change over time. But Munchausen by proxy. So Munchausen's is actually, so there's two versions. There's Munchausen's and Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Munchausen syndrome is actually where you make yourself sick.
Is that what we used to call a hypochondriac?
No, actually, and
okay.
here's the difference. So a hypochondriac is somebody that always believes they're sick. That's a joke. You're like, "What are you, a hypochondriac?"
Yeah.
A hypochondriac actually believes that they are sick.
Okay.
They believe they have cancer every time they get a headache. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But Munchausen syndrome, they know they're not sick.
So they're playing a
They
game.
feign being sick. They'll give themselves poison to make themselves sick. Because with Munchausen's, they want the second. It's called a secondary gain of the sympathy. So they want the sympathy from people. They want the support from people. Now that's regular Munchausen's, but Munchausen syndrome by proxy is where you have either a child or an elder, like an elder parent that maybe is dependent on you, and you make them sick purposely to get sympathy from others.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And that is what Dee Dee had, the mother, in this amazing documentary about Gypsy. She had Munchausen's by proxy, and she was making Gypsy sick over a very long period of time.
Yeah. What kind of mind thinks like that and sees gain from that?
It is a very particular type of disorder. It is not that overly common. I do think that there are a lot of commonalities with borderline personality disorder because both are sort of, there's a lot of manipulation involved in both disorders. There's a lot of secondary gain sought in both disorders. I think that there's a lot of overlap. I think that Munchausen syndrome by proxy, they also might qualify for borderline personality disorder. And that's basically all attention is good attention, even when things are going drastically wrong. Just attention, attention, attention. I need to be the center of everything, even if that is incredibly negative.
Okay. Negative or positive, I don't care. It's all attention, all the same. Kind of
exactly.
Thinking. Okay. Okay, but really that makes sense in a weird kind of way. I don't know.
No, it does.
It does. I don't know why I was able to wrap my mind around that. Now, Erin, tell us about Dee Dee. What kind of individual was this? Well, I mean, I suppose when you were doing this, you kind of felt like you knew her.
Right. So it's hard to make a documentary when one of the main characters has been murdered. You want to be really careful about how you portray them because they're not here to speak for themselves. And so my co-producer Allison and I, we were very thoughtful and, we really researched who Dee Dee was. Dee Dee grew up in Lafourche Parish in Louisiana. And she was good, she was good pals with her dad. She was a somewhat unremarkable girl. She got okay grades, but she always had sort of a penchant for mischief. And, she would later end up becoming a nurse. That's a hallmark occupation of someone who participates in Munchausen by proxy. But then this petty crime started to happen. She would forge bad checks. She would steal the car from her mom or dad. She wanted to get over on people. It was always this thing of like what she can get. She had a very unusual palate. These are all things I wasn't able to include, but she loved mashed potatoes. One of the only things she liked to eat was mashed potatoes with butter on it. She just was this really strange, weird girl, and she met a guy named Rod Blanchard who he worked on an oil rig. He is really handsome, and she said, that's the kind of guy I want. And she soon became pregnant, and she gave birth to her daughter Gypsy Rose. Rod was no longer in the picture at this point. The marriage was a very short one, and she just realized that I think I want something from this. And we saw from birth that Gypsy made, just countless trips to the hospital. And it just sort of devolved from there.
Now, Gypsy Rose, she was born, of course, Gypsy Rose Blanchard that we're talking about. And she was born to Dee Dee. Did she almost immediately try to make her ill, like almost from birth, or was this something, a light bulb that went on, in your opinion, of course, a light bulb that went on over her head going, wait a minute now, if I play a sick card, we can get a whole lot of stuff?
That's such a great question. I'm not sure. I know that she liked to be the center of attention.
Yeah.
Clarissa talked about this potential being borderline. I think that, she was not diagnosed, but that feels very real to me given what I know about the case. She wanted to be in beauty pageants. So here was this